The past chapters have seen some of the most intricate character writing for Isagi in the entire story, all culminating in what is probably his most unhinged portrayal to date. And that leaves us with the question, what are we to make of his new mindset? So, to make sense of the matter, I want to have a deeper look at how Isagi's newfound victory over everything mentality chalks up with his characterization throughout the manga, and show that this really can't be his final destination. Hello, my name is Sean, and I'm keenly aware that this video may well be obsolete by the time I upload it. Also, if you want to help me commission all of this awesome artwork, or just want to hear my thoughts on the weekly Blue Lock chapter, consider supporting me on Patreon. So to start with, I want to ground this discussion in a general pattern of character writing in the NEL that took me embarrassingly long to realize. For most every one of the manga's major characters, their growth in the NEL follows the principle of 2 steps forwards and 1 step backwards. Let me just sketch this out for you. Kunigami brought out his true physical potential and starts acting like an egoist striker. But he became unable to function as a team player. Nagi, for the first time, articulates his dream and seeks to become the world's best. But he finds himself stuck once he can't visualize the next step. Reo starts playing to fulfill Nagi's dream instead of treating him as his property. But he gets hung up on having an exclusive partnership. Barou comes into his own as the true king of the Ubers, but he fails to heed Snuffy's advice and sets himself up on a path of self-destruction. Kaiser abandons his petty desire to protect his current status above all else and comes to articulate his true character needs, but he cuts off anyone who gives him the love he seeks in the process. Rin comes to understand his innermost urges and escapes from the spectres that subordinated him to the expectations of others. But wearing his desires on his sleeve leaves him wide open for others to manipulate. That also very much makes sense from a story structure perspective. If Blue Lock's first act serves to establish the cast, their philosophies and their shortcomings, Act 2 places them on the trajectory to come into their own, but adds in new complications which will presumably be resolved in the 3rd act. So that brings us to Isagi, who, as I will hope to convince you of in this video, has had his own 2 steps forward, 1 step backward moment in the previous chapters. But to explain why, I need to place these developments in the context of Isagi's central character conflict. I probably don't need to remind you about Isagi's very first scene in the manga. He's in a one-on-one showdown with the opposing goalkeeper, about to even the score in the last minute. But right then, he finds his teammate in a slightly better position to score, and so, just as he's been taught all his life, he makes an assist. And the rest is history. And in the aftermath of this loss, Isagi is plagued by what-ifs. If he had simply taken the shot, could he have changed the course of history? Could he have evened the score and made his way to nationals? That's what makes Isagi's first encounter with Jinpachi Ego's revolutionary philosophy so electrifying. He sketches the exact situation that Isagi had just experienced, and encouraged him to do what his environment had always denied him. And so, Isagi dashes forward, fully determined to make amends for his deepest regrets, and live like a true striker henceforth. This is why the question of assisting is so central to Isagi's journey throughout the manga. His very first match in Blue Lock sees him making a pass once again, and forces him to relive his deepest regrets. But then, the tables are turned. In match 2, Isagi discovers in Nico someone with the same shortcoming as himself, and by meeting a counterpart of sorts, he finally internalizes the lesson from his first loss. He's done assisting, and with his first goal in Blue Lock, Isagi is reborn as a true striker. From this moment on, Isagi has turned a new page, ready to make good on his deepest regrets. This is exemplified most clearly in the aftermath of the U20 match, where we come back full circle to Isagi's what-ifs in Chapter 1. After his devastating loss in the Prefectural Tournament, Isagi pondered if he could have changed his destiny if he'd taken the shot himself. Flash forward 150 chapters, and he's found his answer. In the most important match of his life so far, Isagi has done exactly what he failed to do at the start of the series. He broke through the defense, found himself in a one-on-one showdown with the goalie, and shot without hesitation. And having made this a reality, Isagi lands upon the answer to the question that sets him up to join Blue Lock. He experienced the thrill of victory, the pleasure of a goal, and the rapture of changing the world with his own power. And just as an aside, that's one of my favourite quotes in the entire series. What a beautiful moment. So in short, Isagi discovered that he had it in him to change not just his destiny, but the entire world. In Blue Lock's philosophy, the only way to enact change is to take matters in your own hands, to do what Isagi could not in Chapter 1. Now, where it gets interesting is that the first matches of Blue Lock's second part see Isagi facing the exact same dilemma as he did during the start of the first selection. Characters like Yukimiya and Ness denounce Isagi for not acting like a proper striker. Yet, most poignantly, the Barcha match invites direct comparison with Isagi's first showings against Team X, which is especially marked since these are, structurally speaking, the first matches of Blue Lock's first and second parts. Both times, the final goal comes about from Isagi passing to Kunigami, and in both instances, Isagi faces criticisms that his decision was not befitting a true striker. The irony, of course, being that the same figure who thanked Isagi for the assist in the past has now openly turned against him for doing that very thing. Now, the manga makes it clear that there is a world of difference between Isagi's assists at the start of the story and the NEL. Isagi passes in the Prefectural Tournament because he's been indoctrinated with Japan's collectivist ideology. In the NEL, however, each of Isagi's decisive assists come about from a concentration-based challenge. So in other words, these decisions are in fact a sign that Isagi has internalized Blue Lock's teachings. Each of these passes is a conscientious stepping stone to becoming the world's best striker. Nevertheless, Isagi himself acknowledges that these criticisms are fully valid. It's beyond question for him that his assists are indeed compromises on both his and Blue Lock's vision of what makes up the world's best striker. Isagi's desire is, and has been for over 150 chapters, to take the shot himself without hesitation. And anything that falls short of this has been consistently depicted as a failure to embody Blue Lock's ideals and to rectify the mistakes of his past. This is the key factor here. Isagi's innermost desire, as established in Chapter 1, perfectly coincides with the kind of striker that Ego wants to cultivate in his program. And I might be getting a bit ahead of myself here, but it feels highly likely to me that this is the reason why Isagi will eventually attain the status of world's best striker. I'm very much aware that I've been going on for quite a while about things that aren't directly tied to the recent manga events, but in my view, this is really necessary to make sense of what has happened to Isagi. So that's where I want to turn now. During Rin's most recent attack, Isagi stopped him by acting as a decoy and leaving the crowning achievement to Kaiser. But what's important here is the response he gets from Rin in the aftermath. Isagi is a failure of a striker because he celebrated stopping Rin instead of having vied for goals himself. And how I read this exchange, we're supposed to take this as a parallel to all the moments throughout the manga where Isagi gets dismissed for making assists. Of course, I am aware that this isn't in reference to a real assist, but it's still strongly tied to the same type of discourse. Isagi didn't act as befits a real striker, and within Blue Lock's narrative framework, that's the greatest humiliation that its characters can suffer. However, for the first time in the series, Isagi articulates a true rebuttal to this line of reasoning. Not a measly justification of this move being a means to a higher end, but a fully fledged refutation of his detractors' beliefs. So that brings us to the pivotal question about this moment. Has Isagi revealed that all the discourse about what it means to be a striker so far was too shallow? Or is Isagi's newfound mentality misguided? Or as Kaiser has put it, has Isagi lost the plot completely? Or has he tapped into his true ego? Personally, I strongly suspect that Isagi took away the wrong lessons from his confrontation with Rin and Loki, and the purpose of this video is basically to substantiate my views. So let's backtrack once more. The central concern of the PXG match, and one that has been built up since the start of the NEL, is proving your originality. And so, the match offers the origin stories of Isagi's greatest rivals, and sees them change their playstyles to align more closely with their underlying desires. However, all of this is just a preamble for what is surely the dramatic centerpiece of the PXG match. The moment where our protagonist himself returns to his origins. As he's confronted with players that epitomize the qualities that he doesn't have and can never hope to attain, Isagi plunges into despair. All his hopes of becoming the world's best dissipate before his eyes, and he can no longer imagine himself winning. As many before me have noted, this page in particular serves as a deliberate callback to Isagi's outburst after his loss in Chapter 1. Meaning, we've gone full circle to Isagi's point of origin as a striker. And so, just as Kaiser did before him, Isagi realizes that his thinking was clogged up by superficial desires and that he has to shed off his fixations on others, since none of these petty rivalries address his true character needs. And what he lands on, after stripping away every bit of noise, is that he desired victory above all else. Victory at every price, at the cost of his own soul. I talked at the start of this video about character writing in the NEL consistently following a principle of 2 steps forward, 1 step backward, and I think that this is the crux of Isagi's recent developments as well. His encounter with the freaks of nature that make up PXG forced Isagi to confront his own misconceptions about who he is, how he succeeds, and what he desires. And he did so by returning to the moment that demarcates his origin as an egoist striker. All of this is unequivocally a major step forward. More than ever before, the PXG match has led Isagi to interrogate the drives and motives of his fellow players, culminating in his most important moment of soul-searching and self-discovery in the series. And just look at how his signature puzzle pieces are employed to reinforce that point. It's as if Isagi has been covered by a layer of grimy blocks that have clung to him throughout his tenure in Blue Lock. And now the time has come to molt this weathered skin and reveal his true form underneath. All that being said, however, he's also taken a major step backwards. Isagi correctly identifies this one snapshot in time as his moment of origin, but in my view, he completely misunderstood the terms in which he defined victory in chapter 1. So let me revisit that scene one final time. Isagi's team has lost, and he finds himself deeply regretting his part in that, and wondering if he'd sealed his fate by making the assist. That sets Isagi on a very meaningful train of thought, one that is deeply insightful about the nature of his ego. His first thought is that there's no point in entertaining hypotheticals, since their teamwork lost. Not Isagi himself, but the team as a whole. That's because, according to the ideological framework that permeates Japanese sports culture, football is played by 11 people, which makes the very notion that winning takes place on an individual level preposterous. Single players can't win or lose because they're nothing more than components of a reified entity that is the team. By analogy, think of the way we talk about individual body parts versus the body as a whole. If my foot were to land on a banana peel and cause this sack of flesh that is me to slip, it would sound strange to say that my foot, or my torso, or my head fell, right? Rather, you'd say that I, in my capacity as a collective assembly of body parts, have fallen onto my face. This is the basic assumption under which Japanese football is operating, and in my view, Isagi's journey as an egoist striker commences once he subconsciously rejects this constructed reality. In fact, he articulates this in something akin to a stream of consciousness. One for all, you can't win. You, the individual, cannot conceptually win in a system where one is subsumed by all. That's why it's pointless to speculate whether he could have changed his destiny, because the course of destiny is not paved by individual actors. And so, Isagi's outbursts represents nothing less than a revolutionary paradigm shift. I wanted to win is his true origin, because here, he internally, subliminally, redefines the very concept of winning and losing. I, as a discrete entity, could celebrate a victory that is distinct from the performance of the team as a whole. This is Yoichi Isagi thinking the hitherto unthinkable. In fact, this is reflected by the very context in which Isagi's assist took place. The Ichinan team was losing 0-1, so even if Isagi had scored, this would have resulted in a tie, not a victory. Yes, a last-minute goal might have triggered overtime or penalties or something, and thereby given Ichinan the chance to win, but Isagi could have never scored a winning goal then and there. Now, I know this might seem like I'm arguing semantics here, but in my view, this is a critical point. The very fact that Isagi equates scoring this goal to a victory means that he's refigured what he conceives of as winning from the level of the collective to that of the individual. Also, just to note, the same chapter has the world's greatest striker say that he prefers to lose while scoring a hat-trick over winning by making an assist, meaning a true egoist would always elect a personal victory over what benefits their team. So, getting back to current manga events, my sense is that when Isagi in the PXG match recalled the moment that turned him into the striker he is today, he landed on the most superficial interpretation of his inner thoughts. I wanted to win rather than I wanted to win. His deepest regret was not that he lost the match, but that he had forsaken his one opportunity to win in a personal capacity. That's why, in my view, Isagi's conclusion that he desires victory above all else, one where he willingly casts aside his own ego and places himself on equal footing with the rival he despises, sets him on the exact opposite course of his true desires. Isagi might have dropped some of the fixations that were interfering with his thinking, but he only ended up chasing down a further dead end. This also seems to be suggested by the imagery of chapter 284, especially in light of the ego type framework that's been built up throughout the match. Isagi has unequivocally defined himself as a freedom type, who thrives when given limitless possibilities. Yet, right as he establishes that he wants to delve further into this new version of himself, we see his puzzle pieces coming together in the form of a cube, or rather, a prison, an enclosed space where every path of escape is gradually closed off. And as the kicker, the golden piece that usually represents the winning move now seals the final opening. In short, the most important part of his Devil's Pact with Kaiser effectively locks away his ego. And those might be ideal conditions for a player like Kaiser, who is at his best when he rebels against restriction, but it's a virtual death knell for a more free-spirited striker. Just one more thing. Isagi's talk about abandoning his ego and acting like a machine calls to mind the scene that immediately preceded the start of the PXG match. That of Kunigami, the test subject who must abandon his ego. So in other words, we're meant to understand that Isagi the machine will become something akin to Cyborg Rensuke. And given that the purpose of the new Kunigami seems to be to merely facilitate the birth of the world's greatest striker, it doesn't spell well at all that our protagonist is viewing himself in the same terms. So, if I were to predict how the match will conclude, I assume that Isagi will most likely come to the realization that his current approach is holding him back rather than helping him. And this will trigger a final awakening of sorts to end the match. One of my main reasons for thinking this is that the main purpose of the NEL as an arc is to set up Isagi as a world-class player and the prime contestant for world's best striker among the Blue Lock candidates. And so I simply can't imagine that the arc where Isagi gradually internalizes the mindset to become the world's best will have him forsake his desire at the final hurdle. But as said, this is very much a video where I could be proven painfully wrong in a matter of weeks, and for any viewers in the distant future, you are more than welcome to laugh at me in the comments. Anyways, as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the topic, and if you liked what you saw, consider subscribing for more in-depth Blue Lock analysis every other week. And if you want to support me even further, join me on Patreon to get my first thoughts on the weekly chapters. And in particular, I'd like to thank my €10 patrons for all their generous support. Patrician Pat, Orangey Legend, Trishula the Best Boy, you're legends of the game. And until next time, Slán go fóill.